Interiority.
Hello, everybody, and thank you
weed.
so much for meeting me early. I hugely appreciate it. And we have a friend of ours plays with Ani DeFranco in her trio, and they're in Petaluma, and he put us on the guest list, and so we're trying to get to that. And it starts at 8:30. It turns out they're not even playing until 9:30, which is like I'm asleep.
I'm having problems.
So
I can't.
this
wait
is
a minute.
burning my candle at every end, but
we can hear you.
I mean, I was up at 4:30 this morning. So anyway, but thank you for letting me try to to give it a hurrah. So I'm really excited about this class, and let's dive in with the goals check-in. So remember, this is just a little routine that we have that has proven to be very deep and productive over time, which is, you're setting goals, and then you're kind of looking at how did that go? And what you're really trying to do is find the goal that really works for you, that is some sort of, it's some kind of combination of it's easy enough that it happens, it's kind of boring enough that you don't forget it, that it's not like you're doing some wild inventive thing, but you're just doing this thing. And but it's shaped in a way that kind of fits you and your life, or maybe it's like pushing a little bit into you and your life, but to make room for the writing, but not so uncomfortably that you end up not being able to do it. So you're like, okay, how did my goal go? I tried this, and you kind of by trial and error, much like revision, you sort of find the right goal for you. So so go ahead and put that in the chat. And I think Jody and Felicia have let me know they will not be here. And I'm so very bad at this. I can never tell who's not here, based on, but I'll look at my list. And it's not because I don't, value and love everybody. It's just that thing of like, who's missing? It's such a complex mind puzzle.
Hard to see the negative space.
All right, Francis. Oh, Sue. Sue is the missing person. I think Sue is on safari. So I think it is us, a tight little unit of 5 plus me. All right, great. So Aline says, I made my goal, finish the chapter that I couldn't get done. I love it. That's great. It's no good, but it's on paper and no good. That is excellent. That's the step before on paper and getting better, right? So bravo. That's the process. I love it. Great. Francis, revise 2 scenes a day. I am doing it. Yay. Yeah, because you were kind of in that transition space, and you're in it. And in the next phase, some scenes take longer and some are easier. Absolutely. Well, good. Yeah. And so that's kind of, you'll find, maybe that's great. You have 2 scenes a day, and sometimes, that what that's going to look like might expand and shrink, and, and hopefully there's sometimes a balance between the two. And then if you find, if you hit something really hard, you may shift your goal to match that. So, but it sounds like it's working for you to have that kind of variation. Yeah. So
it's been tempting to just skip something over.
I'm not here. There we go. You were not muted, but my computer was muted. What were you saying?
If you see one and think that's difficult, it's like, well, why don't I just skip this one? But I made myself go through it.
Yeah, chronology is really helpful too for narrative. First of all, it's often a very useful way to go. It's a little counterintuitive sometimes to creatives. I know I bounce all over the place, but it's actually very powerful, right? Causality comes with it, all sorts of things. And yeah, like then pushing through, and you're pushing through your experience and what the reader's experiencing. So I think that's, and then you can't just go around the hard parts. So
I found I have to change that with Book in a Year, though, because I'm never quite where I need to be.
Right. Well, you're doing two things at once, so
Oh,
that,
well, that's right.
that counts.
Multitasking.
Yes. Julia, once again, I can't recall my goal for this group specifically, but I know I wanted to write certain mornings, and this has been happening. Well, good. That's it. That's it.
There's one.
I mean, your goal should be the same, right? It should be the same in every context. It should, you know, it's your writing goal, and we're just here to cheer you on. So that's good. Eleanor, I was inconsistent in my threaded words goal. I wrote several shorter pieces during the last 10 days. Great, but did not consistently write, continued napping. Well, that sounds like that's where you're at. That's what needs to be happening right now. That's sort of the number one thing is the napping, and then you're writing. So that's pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, me too. I like it. And Catherine, the best thing I can say about my goals is that the class has motivated me to keep the journey moving from day to day. That is the best thing. That's all we want. Yes.
Really, because my biggest problem was just sitting down to do it.
Yeah.
And with this, by touching base so many times, I find that it doesn't leave my mind. So I do it.
Good. Good. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a really good strategy.
Yeah. I wrote, I think, 4 new scenes.
Amazing.
Altogether.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Bravo, everybody. I love it. We're hitting our stride here. So a lot of people wanted to think about interiority and exteriority and how to make those work. And I started sort of doing 2 separate classes, and I thought, well, no, they're very related. In fact, definitionally, I don't know, there's all kinds of definitions when you get into the weeds. Like there's not a whole lot of agreement, but for our purposes, what I did was I called, what have I written here? Exteriority. That is not a term I am attempting to coin. I actually mean exposition, although exteriority is also going to come into play here. So, but actually, so what I was interested in is separating out interiority and exposition, even though they're sort of, one might be subsumed within the other, and you can find many different definitions. But for our purposes, interiority is when we're inside the character's thoughts and feelings, right? And exposition then is the narrator kind of coming in to tell or explain or muse. So it's not the character's interiority, but it's the narrator. Now, sometimes if in a first person book, the narrator is a character, but there might be and this is going to be August. This is some of the stuff that's going to come to play in August Sonoma County Writers Camp. There's sometimes like a distance between the narrator who's telling the story and that narrator who lived the story. And certainly in memoir, that's very much the case, right? There's the character who's living the story that a memoirist is choosing to pull from life, and then there's the narrator, however much later, with a different understanding of the events, with a sense of that arc of that story. But that comes to play in fiction as well. So interiority, we're talking about the internal thoughts and feelings of characters. Exposition is the narration, the kind of telling and explaining and musing of the character, of the narrator, and of the narrative, right, of the story. And this will become much clearer with the examples. So hurrah for examples. And then you'll have the alternate week ones as well. So we're gonna get to do kind of a lovely deep dive into this, and see some of the ways that what makes it kind of juicy, what makes it work, what makes it strong. Because people who, there are people who are prone to interiority, and then people say, well, wait a minute, I just got lost in the character's head. Those of us prone to interiority like to park our character on an airplane or in a car, or in bed and just have them think. And it's no surprise, because what are we doing? We're sitting at a desk or a cafe and at a computer or a journal, and we are thinking, right? So our lives are driven by interiority. It's no surprise that some of us are also inclined to it. But I've also worked with folks who do no interior, like I do not have that impulse towards interiority, who stay very external and do a lot of action and description and need to bring in more interiority. And I will say for myself, I've had to really learn to bring in emotion. You know, the interiority I tend toward is pretty intellectual, and to really tap into what is the character feeling and how do they know what they're feeling? What does it feel like to feel? Right. So for the therapists here, I know I've probably talked about this, but I've had like therapists say to me, you know, where in your body do you feel that? And like at the time I was just like, what do you mean my body? Like, what are you even talking about? I'm in my head. This is me. So that's a writing thing too, right? Like, where in your body is your character experiencing emotion? Okay. So, it's good because then you can write therapy off your text as a writer. It's just technique. It's crap. Okay, so let's jump in with exercise number 1. And we're looking at action followed by exposition. So, and this is one of the most important things I think we're going to get out of this class, which is that weave, the weave. So forget exteriority. but interiority, exposition, and then weaving interiority and exposition with exteriority. That weave is a big strength for your craft. And so that you're not going into these long, you know, where we're just off in someone's head, but we keep being in the world, but we get to have access to the emotions and thoughts as well. Okay, so I'm going to read you 2 examples of this. One is from the novel The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee. And you'll see, just kind of notice the part that's external is the part that, you know, could be filmed, or we could mime it or act it out, or it's a sensate detail. And then it shifts and it goes into exposition. It goes into this more sort of this narrative explanation and so on. So, and you can see, what the power of it here. We're going to see how it highlights a turning point or brings out the significance of a moment. Here is one. He gestured to a crowd of gentlemen shadowed by the gaslights of the courtyard, who waved back. I waved as well. I returned to this moment frequently, for it was when everything that came next in my life was decided. So what is the part here that is external? What is the part that that you could film or enact?
The first 2 sentences.
Yes, the first 2 sentences, right? And you don't know the interiority. Now, we've talked some about this, and we will more, but there's a mood created, right? The gentlemen are shadowed by the gaslights of the courtyard. So there's definitely a mood, which is to say there's an emotion, right? There's the details that are being noticed are drawn from that mood, you know, are creating that mood, but it's external. And then we get this narration. I returned to this moment frequently, for it was when everything that came next in my life was decided. That makes this a story moment, right? That makes this a moment of significance. And the difference between story and life is that story is about moments of significance. It's about when things changed. It's about when we understood something. It's about when things were revealed. It's about when things were disguised. It's about, you know, it's about all of those kind of heightened moments. So bringing an exposition here, we're in the world, right? So that external part's important. We've got we're picturing something. We're feeling something. We're seeing something. And then we're getting this lovely hook of exposition, right? And you can, you know, you can take this exact thing. So start with some action, some detail, and then move into exposition. Here's another example from a short story in the collection, You Think It, I'll Say It by Curtis Sittenfeld. When I finished, I walked along Water Street, not entirely sure what to do. I had no idea, of course, that of all the feelings of my youth that would pass, it was this one, of an abundance of time so great as to routinely be unfillable, that would vanish with the least ceremony.
Oh, boy.
Isn't that wonderful? So what is the
We
part
relate
that is,
to that.
what's the part that's external here?
When I finished, I walked along Water Street.
Yeah. And pretty much that's it. Because not entirely sure what to do, we make a shift into some interiority, right? We're getting her sort of sense of doubt. So she's wandering. And then we move into this exposition. I had no, and it backs up. You can see that both of these examples, they kind of zoom out, right? In camera terms. And we get some insight that the narrator has that the character doesn't in that moment, even though the character is an earlier version of the narrator, right? But the narrator knows something about that moment that the character doesn't. And by giving us that, we get this juicy significance that story is all about, that we read story for, so that we can understand life, that, because of the possibilities of what a narrator can do that we can't do in our just blind living. Lots of action, not always as much insight. So play with this, dig in, give us a sentence of world, maybe two, and then let it pull back. What matters about this moment? And there is going to be something if it's in your story, right? All right, so let's do 10 minutes. Couple more minutes. Okay, so we have 5. So we're gonna have a trio and a duo. so so let's just do I just let the computer sort you, and you're all very familiar with each other. But in any case, let's do for the trio. If you can do 4 minutes each, elect a timekeeper, please. For the duo, you'll have 6 minutes each. We will regroup in 12 minutes and just check in. Okay. Go ahead and join your room. All righty. We're waiting for our pair to come back. Did you all get to read? Good.
So, but you're muted.
I am?
No.
No, I said we'd
Oh.
answer, but we were muted. So.
Ah, yes. Where?
I really enjoyed yesterday evening's session with Debbie. That was charming.
Yay. Yeah, I was so happy to see you there, and you asked a good question.
Well, I'm always worried about this because it just keeps haunting me.
Yes, well, no.
However,
Yeah.
I now have 2 examples of why you don't have to have 50 to 70,000 words.
There you go. Hi, so what did we learn about exposition and action from your own writing? Anything come up? Do you respond as a reader to exposition, to action, to the combination?
I could speak as a reader of or reader of Eleanor's work. That there's something super elegant and fluid about the writing that Eleanor read, which like weaves in and out of multiple layers and is going back and forth. Like she started with something you could film, a conversation, and then something that's said that takes her to the interior, and then pivots back to something observable. And it's like between each of those in and out, there's a hinge. It's either something she's seeing that's filmable, that then a symbol kind of turns into a symbol that reminds her of a thought or develops a thought inside, and then pulls back out with another hinge. Yeah. It was very deft. It was really well.
That's it. And that's the art of it, right? And so when people say, oh, it gets bogged down either with too much or not enough, we start to look at how is it woven in.
Yeah. I see.
Good. All right. Well, let's look at number 2. So that was action followed by exposition. And now we're going to see the same technique at play with interiority. So a couple of examples. One is from the novel Unsheltered by Barbara Kingsolver. He turned and wrote the word molecule on the slate wall behind him, noting as always how dubious a word may appear when written large, inches from one's nose. So, I love this. It gives us, we see the character, right? The action is turning, writing the word molecule, the word, the specificity of the word, and all of those details create character. They're part of the story. It's no accident that the word he wrote is molecule. So everything is important here. The slate wall, right? It gives us the era, or it's kind of gives us a great visual. So that first half before the comma is action. And then the word noting is sort of what Julia called the hinge, right? Noting, as always. So this is, now we're getting into character. This is something about this character. He always sort of notices that a word that you've just written sort of boldly on the wall, the slate wall, suddenly appears dubious, right? How dubious a word may appear when written large, inches from one's nose, which of course then brings us beautifully back into the image. Right, but now kind of loaded with the feeling he has about that action that he's just taken. So that gives us a lot about character. It complicates that moment, right? It gives us a little tension around the action of writing the word molecule. So Donald Moss does all those books like The Breakout Novelist, and he says tension on every page. And I've heard writers rail, how can you have tension on every page? But here's just right here, like you're boldly writing a big word, and in fact, then it suddenly appears dubious. That's a little bit of tension. And then this is from New People, also a novel by Danzy Senna. In the half-light, Maria examines her hand, the diamond and sapphire ring. It looks, am I doing the wrong ones? I did Tuesday. Where are we?
We're Wednesday.
I did the wrong one. These ones are everybody, but I realized I did the wrong ones with number 1. But anyway, moving along.
That's all right.
We'll just have to tell Felicia. Okay. So the New People one is, in the half-light, Maria examines her hand, the diamond and sapphire ring. It looks like somebody else's hand, a woman she would like to become someday, a fiancé, the hand of a special somebody, the hand of an emergency contact on an official form. The ring is evidence that she is part of this tribe, herself, Khalil, Lisa, their friends, a tangle of mud-colored new people who have come to carry the nation, blood-soaked, guilty of everything of which it has been accused, into the future. So I love this, so that in the half-light, right, that gives us again that mood, which creates emotion, right?
Yeah.
Examines her hand, the diamond and sapphire ring. So that's something we can really see. And then we start staying with the visual, but now we're getting her thoughts about what she's seeing. It looks like somebody else's hand, a woman she would like to become someday, which is wonderful. It's a specific idea, and it gives us something, which is the gap between who she wants to be and who she sees herself as actually being now, a fiance, right? The hand of a special somebody. And even there, like that word choice, it's like special and somebody are almost a little in contradiction with each other, right? The hand of an emergency contact on an official form. Again, just a wonderful specificity that's building this life, but she's actually distanced from. The ring is evidence that she is part of this tribe. And as she's looking at it in the half-light with this distance, we see her, that kind of a breach, right, with that tribe, that this ring is evidence of, that distance from her own hand, even as we're getting this vision of what this tribe is capable of doing. So by weaving the physical evidence, the physical action, that sensate part that we could film with how she sees it, and starting to open that gap and create some of the tension between what she's seeing and what she feels about what she's seeing, who she wants to be and what her tribe is capable of, and this way in which she's separating herself from it. So again, if we go too abstractly into the interiority, we lose the characters, we lose the world. But if we stay too strictly with the action, we sometimes lose the emotion. So this again, we're balancing, and that was a lot of what people wanted to know, right? How to not sort of swing too far in one direction. So we're really looking at that weave with the Barbara Kingsolver. That's one sentence, right? So it begins with the action and the exteriority, swings into the interiority, and then even comes back out with an image. With the Danzy Senna, exterior, and then all of that interiority is also full of images, right? So that's another technique, is that even when the character's thinking and feeling, that we often think and feel and fear and worry and all of those things in concrete images as well. So you can still use that technique. Yeah, you have a question, Julia?
Yeah, just a thought about so the Maria examines her hand, that clause, like that is filmable, right?
Yeah.
But there's something different about like Maria examines her hand versus something maybe Maria looked at her hand or looked to her hand. Like the tense and the word choice that this already feels like it is pushing more toward interiority, even though it's filmable. Then like I'm thinking about Jhumpa Lahiri, who always feels so filmable.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think one of the sort of arts of creating even the external things is that, is that word choice is going to swing it one way or the other. And yes, and I do think you're right. I think the word examines starts to give us sort of a door into interiority just in and of itself. But yeah, so I mean, it could be, in the half light and Maria holds her hand up in front of her face, right?
Yeah.
Then that wouldn't even have that kind of, that same suggestion. So definitely, but even
Isn't
with,
it a matter of intensity here? I mean, to look at something is one thing, to examine it is very intense.
yeah, it has a whole meaning to it. And when you think about filming, so the actor, of course, then would bring to that, would bring that intensity in you. I always think of like Emma Thompson's cheekbone in Remains of the Day, like how it would tense and it was like full of emotion. So even though it was external, you had such a kind of view of her internal, what was creating her, inside her, that was creating that external. So yeah, so I think we use vocabulary, verbs, those kinds of things to do that, to add that nuance and to kind of, yeah, move inside a little bit. But you could, that could be in a script and you could see the actor doing it, but they would use that. Examine would be different than glances at, for example, right? So for sure. Yeah. So again, and you do whatever you want. This is your writing time, but you're playing with this sort of this difference that we've outlined a little bit between interiority and exposition. So if in the first one you really played with that kind of narrative exposition, the backing up, the looking, here we're going into the character. How is the character feeling about what they are seeing, touching, smelling, tasting, doing? Okay, so let's do 15 minutes. All right, 14 because it's 6:51. couple more minutes. Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Who would like to read? Oh, let me say this. If you're revising, even in 15 minutes, maybe you wrote, like someone would just, for first drafting, would write 1 or 2 paragraphs. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at like a half a page. And that is actually the amount that I can sort of hold and look at the craft level. When we go beyond that, we're starting to look at scene, and then it fills up too much time for the group and the kind of nature of what we're doing in terms of looking at craft. So if you are working on revision, zero in on like 1 paragraph, maybe 2, something like about that, and then let's think about it on that deeper craft level. All right, who's ready? Francis. Great.
I hope this isn't too long. It's I stumbled over the words for mountain. I stumbled over the word for mountain. Lida, my Danish teacher, pronounced it for me. I stared at the computer screen as her mouth moved. I looked at the pronunciation hints I had written. I tried again. Bjerg. B-J-E-R-G. No, she says, the word begins with B-J. You need to pronounce the J. Like Bjorn or Bjork. I try again. Bjauer. The word is spelled B-J-E-R-G, like berg or mountain, but in Danish it is Bjauer. Why am I still trying to learn Danish? What am I trying to prove? It is the most unpronounceable of the Scandinavian languages. Swedes and Norwegians don't understand it. I don't know German, but that is a language I can actually pronounce. This is the mountain I am climbing. I picture life's pleasure when he actually understands me, or will he ever understand me?
Is this part of the novel?
No,
Oh,
this
it's a different thing. I was going to say, it's a very different voice. Isn't that interesting? It's a very different voice. Yeah. I love that. It's funny. I've been reading in the Akasha Station, the Ben Lerner's first book. Mm-hmm. And it's very much about like language and being an outsider in language, and it reminded me of that because there's something so pleasurable about like those stumbles and the humor of that and being stuck on those letter combinations and things. Yeah.
I'll have to look at that book. I didn't know it got into linguistics.
Yeah. Have you read him, Julia?
Lerner?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. The Topeka School, and I'm just in the middle of 1004.
Okay, yeah. So this is the first one I've read, but I think I was thinking of you because it's so funny. To me, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Although I was talking to a friend who was like, I hate him. But anyway.
Oh, I know. There's, yeah, we'll talk about that at another time.
Yes. But anyway, but good work, Francis. I like that stuff. I like digging into that's an obstacle. It's a real life obstacle, and the kind of, why am I doing this? And yet clearly there's that investment,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. All right. And I like also the move between the action of stumbling and then the sort of, what am I doing here, and all the internal grappling. So yeah. All right, let's hear another one. Who's next? All right, Aline.
Okay, this is a brand new scene for me, so there we go. They've just landed at an airfield. Later, despite the strange way she flew across the channel, Reva would come to be grateful for the space it had afforded her. On landing, there was so much movement, so much talking, that she felt as if she was outside her body, staring down at what was happening. She climbed out and immediately had to deal with language she didn't fully understand. Her English language skills were excellent, but every person she met spoke with a different accent. When more than one spoke at the same time, she had trouble sorting out what was going on. They hustled her into a warm shed and handed her a cup filled with milky liquid that turned out to be tea with sugar. She could hardly swallow it, but it was hot and she was cold. Outside, in the now early dawn light, men were lifting Pierre's body out of the plane. She could see an arm, then his head upside down. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. This would be her last image of Pierre. Someone tapped her on the shoulder and she turned to see sympathetic eyes. Did you know him well? Since we were children. I'm sorry, would you like more tea? Reva shook her head and turned back to the window. Pierre was gone, and so were the stars. The sun was exerting its dominance now, pink and pale blue streaking the sky. The same sky as in Alsace, she reminded herself. Just like home, she said to herself, knowing full well that it felt nothing like home and that she'd be unlikely to see it again for a long time, if ever. What was home anyway? For humans, it was the earth, but somehow that thought was inadequate. The sense of home was palpable at that moment because it was missing. She leaned her forehead on the glass pane. Cold, so cold. It matched what she felt inside, the cold of being alone in the world, alone in this place where she knew no one.
Great. Yeah, it's funny that both these, this happens a lot, but like touched on language, right? That whole, the kind of entering into a foreign language, and then just the image of his body and her grappling with that, and the sky, and her kind of trying to convince herself that it's like home. I felt I wanted a little more around the warm eyes. I was like, who is it? Who's the warm eyes? Just do those turn out to be that sort of connects with her, right? So but yeah, but I think you've sort of got a lot of interesting tensions going on with all of those different, the newness, the homesickness or whatever, the dead body, the unfamiliarity, and I like her struggle to sort of say, look, it's like home, right? To connect, and the failure of that, because we like her, she's sort of trying in this terribly challenging moment. So great. All right, who's next? Anybody? All right, Catherine.
Okay.
Let's hear from everybody and see how it goes.
After the funeral, where Felicia heard her father eulogized by important-looking men in formal uniforms, she felt disconnected from her father and from herself. After she arrived home with her mother, she went to her room, picked up the photograph of her father in the white mother-of-pearl frame, and lay down on the bed. At first, she held the photo close to her breast and wordlessly caressed it. Then she turned over on her side, facing the fading light, and held it at arm's length, looking intently at her father's face and eyes especially, and the thoughts and feelings he must intend for her. He wanted her to to love the world with all its beauty, its tall mountains and rolling hills, its warm, innocent animals like the llamas, the coyotes, and even the fierce mountain lions. He wanted her to understand what love meant in different situations and how she needed to temper it according to the character of the creature. Above all, he wanted her to respect all, especially people, particularly those who tried to hurt her or keep her on the outside. He wanted her to be proud of her family and her heritage, so that one day others would look at her for how to maintain a respectful, loving approach to living. She felt what must be his presence in the room with her, and she smelled again the monsoon rain on the hot concrete outside her home the day before he left for Kuwait.
Beautiful. I love, first of all, the physical details, the frame, the mother of pearl frame. So we just, those details really bring us into a moment and into even the emotion of a moment as she's lying there holding the frame and then looking into his eyes. And then I love the specificity of what she feels he's conveying through the photograph to her. After a time, I was a little bit curious as to how much was remembered and how much was projected. I became curious, which is sort of what I think a reader's question. I don't think it's a flaw or necessarily has to be answered in that moment, and it might already be if I was in the flow of the whole thing, but it was just something that I sort of loved how much she was getting from communing with this picture, and it made me curious about that. And then I love coming back to the smell. And it's interesting because first I thought we were coming back to the physical moment we were in, but in fact, maybe then it was reminding her of his departure, right? So the smell was a really vivid sensate detail. So I think you're wielding those sensate details effectively so that we're kind of then the emotional piece is in there as well, right? But I think otherwise it floats away if we don't have both.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
All right, Julia, and then we'll hear from Eleanor, and then we'll see what happens.
I have a very short part, and there's not much interiority. I kind of ended up in the concrete.
Curious about that, maybe. We don't need.
Yeah. The train pulled into Denver's Union Station, a 30-minute stop, the conductor announced. Time to disembark for some fresh air and take a look around, he encouraged over the crackling speakers. Allison stepped off the sleeper car and wandered around the large station, then bought a map she didn't need, some good coffee from a kiosk, and a crime novel to take her the rest of the journey to Chicago. The station was lovely, but really she just wanted to get back to the rows of tracks and watch the trains resting like long silver snakes, dozing absolutely still in the late morning sun. She'd been at this station only once before on her way to Los Angeles for the first time ever at 18, but back then she'd not even noticed the trains.
Like that.
Fabulous. So what's interesting is it goes into an interiority, but it's a very vivid and sensate interiority. So first we're in the external, although again, he, like his voice encouraged them, or his words, the word encouraged has that kind of flavor of this is how she's taking it, right? I mean, it's in the description wonderfully, right? And then we go out into the train, into the station, and she's doing her actions. And then we get, it was lovely, but that's her analysis. She's starting to kind of think it through. It was lovely, but she wanted this, this is what she wanted. And then the pull back, right, to this earlier moment and what is very different between those two moments, which again is a whole story move, right? That's a little character arc. So that's a great kind of exposition. But all of it couched in very vivid terms so that we flash to the sensate moment of when she was 18 and not noticing the trains, right? So you're using the techniques of exteriority and action, but they're actually in service also of the interiority and of the exposition. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think the thing also and this is a longer conversation for later. But the thing that's confusing to me is sort of about like bouncing around in that way that I am doing this, like just writing here and there, is I'm not clear. There's all of those different ways of writing are so different, and I'm not sure that there's a consistent voice throughout, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Because of these subtle things that you're talking about, right? The what you were just describing. Like sometimes I feel like the view is a little different.
And it probably is. But then when you print it out and you read it, first of all, the first draft, you're learning so many things, and you may discover, you'll discover which scenes are necessary and what some scenes will suggest other scenes that aren't there yet, and all of that'll happen. Then at some point when you're more doing line editing, you'll be able to start to see, this I need a bit of interior, or like I had a scene where I was like, I need to pull in some more detail. Like I went to internal and I need to drop in more exterior detail. So you'll just know that, and then you can actually just do that. You know what I mean? You can find that place to pull, or it's super external and you're like, I want to pull in a little beat of thought, So that's a great revision. That's not easy, but it's pleasurable to do in revision. I like revision, so great. Yeah, great piece.
Thank you.
Eleanor.
Okay. When Dr. Paik enters the exam room, he smiles and immediately extends his hand to each of us, first to me, then to Alex, and then to my friend Lynn. His palm is soft and his manner warm, but with a subtle touch of medical distance. His white coat is unbuttoned at the top, neatly pressed, and his name embroidered in red on the pocket. You must be very surprised, he says, turning to me. I will myself to pause and take a deep breath. I don't think shock is too strong a word, I say. He nods and begins a series of gentle questions. When did I first notice the bleeding? Was I currently in pain? Why had I elected a supracervical hysterectomy in 1995? He has several screens full of photos of the female reproductive system on his computer display. As we talk, he begins to explain the surgery to remove all my female organs, pointing out fallopian tubes, the cervix, the ovaries. He says he will also remove 15 lymph nodes from my abdomen and the omentum, a layer of fat that lines the pelvis. Cancer cells love to hide in fat, he says. I find this oddly comforting. The surgery will take away their hiding places. Lynn takes notes on a yellow legal pad. I sit on the exam table knee to knee with Dr. Paik, who sits on a stool directly across from me. Alex is taking notes on his iPad. Colorful parrots perch on huge palm fronds in the blue and orange framed print on his office wall.
Yeah, so wonderful example, first of all, of the external details that are noticed by a character, a point of view character in a particular moment give us so much, right? So just like that last image of the parrots, moving to that image in this moment of kind of intensity and the note taking and all the different things, it has a real emotional resonance to it. And then, so we're sort of in the action of the room, and then we have the sort of, I think there's a line about like the subtle touch of medical distance or something, right? So that's kind of, we start to really explicitly get the character and kind of the way she's seeing it there. And then when she says, I will myself, that is her emotional, right, interior there, something being oddly comforting. So there are these kind of beautiful moments where that interiority wells up, in, again, a very a descriptive, objective, action-filled world, but not objective, because again, all those details knee to knee with the doctor, right? That there's a sort of intimacy there, or the way that they touch hands, and then those other details about the note taking and the parrots and stuff. So it's really deftly done, and it's a nice way to just see those bits of interiority kind of welling up out of the scene and through the action. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's do the last one. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna do W this time. I'll let poor Felicia know, or you guys can. Okay, so yeah, because okay, so interiority and exposition. So what else? So we talked a little bit about how, like with Julia's, for example, the interior that she was, the sort of moment she was flashing to about the 18-year-old was very vivid still. So using still sensate detail even in interiority and in exposition. We've talked about that being a powerful way to bring those alive, and voice and conflict. So the interiority and the exposition can't be sort of dull, abstract sort of treaties, right?
Yes.
And they sometimes, we can sometimes become fascinated with our own thoughts or our characters' thoughts. So how do we keep those as alive on the page, as vivid, as specific to character, to moment, to what's going on, as full of tension? So that's what this last exercise is looking like. And so starting with Gone Girl, this is the husband, just early on in the first or second chapter. He says there's actually a lot of backstory delivered in the first chapter of Gone Girl. It's sort of funny because he wakes up in bed, and that's, there's sort of all these like rules, like don't just have your character like wake up in bed because it's done so much or whatever. And it's like, it just goes to show that if it works, it works. But so he wakes up in bed, and it's his 5th anniversary, and he knows his wife is downstairs making breakfast, but that also her rituals really test him enormously. And there's a lot of tension between them. And so I think that works to make the backstory, the how did we get here story that he's kind of combing through, matter, right? That it matters to the present. And then and so then I think this might be chapter 2, but so he says, I was very late getting to work. My sister, now we're getting a little more backstory. My sister and I had done a foolish thing when we both moved back home. We had done what we always talked about doing. We opened a bar. We borrowed money from Amy, his wife, to do this, $80,000, which was once nothing to Amy, but by then was almost everything. Little character arc in there, right? Informationally given character arc. Or plot arc. I swore I would pay her back with interest. I would not be a man who borrowed from his wife. I could feel my dad twisting his lips at the very idea. Well, there are all kinds of men, his most damning phrase, the second half left unsaid, and you are the wrong kind. But truly, it was a practical decision, a smart business move. You hear all this justification, right? Like he says, I would not be a man who borrowed from his wife, as he's borrowing money from his wife, right? So there's a lot of tension in making a declaration that is patently untrue, right? And being determined to somehow counter it effectively. And now, it was a practical decision, a business move. So these justifications. Amy and I both needed new careers. This would be mine. She would pick one someday or not. But in the meantime, here was an income made possible by the last of Amy's trust fund. So nice stakes, right? Like he really can't, he's sort of stacking up. Like he doesn't want to be this person. He's determined to pay her back with interest, maybe, and so maybe be able to support her, be able to support them. And yet, and then we've got the memory of the dad, but again, it's given through a wonderful external facial expression and a phrase. And so bringing in, again, all that sensate detail, all that filmable kind of piece into his memory, into his grappling, right? This internal grappling with what has happened, with backstory, but making it very vivid and sensate and tense and with complication. And contradiction. And so I was very late getting to work is the present action. It's not particularly sensate itself yet. We're not in the parking lot with him or whatever yet, but we start there. And then we get this foolish thing. We've done a foolish thing. Well, that's already story, right? Anything foolish is going to hook our interest. So struggling over the choices made, justification, comparison, opinion, all of that, hooks us, and so it brings alive this exposition. And then this is from Unsheltered again. An editor at Harper's Monthly had returned an encouraging correspondence, and Mary took all encouragement to heart. It was a quality Thatcher noticed because he lacked it. So comparison, right? Rose hinted at his weak ambition, Rose is his wife, but the disease was more crippling than that. He distrusted praise and took detractors at their word. So there's the comparison of Thatcher's comparison of himself to Mary, who takes all encouragement to heart. And he notices this because he doesn't do that, right? He distrusts praise. And then we triangulate with the wife coming in here and saying, oh, he's just not ambitious, right? But he's saying, no, it's worse than that. It's more crippling than that. So again, a strong kind of vivid vocabulary, a lot of tension, not just two-way tension, but three-way tension around what is going on here, what's at stake, around contrasts and comparisons, which is a lot of the mechanism of story is contrast and comparisons among characters. So lots of fun stuff to play with, to kind of take exposition and infuse it with character, with story problems, with struggle. So that is what we're going to do next. And let's do like an sort of 8-minute one, and just make sure we can hear everybody. We may end up running short, but I don't want to run long. So let's give that a shot and then get to hear from everybody. Okay. Good timing. Couple more minutes. Okay, we ran a little bit long. I'm hoping we can hear from everybody, but that means really keep it short. So if you wrote long because we went long, read us a snippet, and everyone's gotten to read once already, but let's just hear a little bit from everybody else. I'm just going to start up here, Catherine, and we'll just work our way down. It'll go Catherine, Eileen, Frances, Eleanor, Julia.
Okay. It was past Grandma's bedtime when Bruce got home. As always, she had left the floor lamp in the living room on low, and the FM classical station soothing serenaded her as she slept or didn't. Bruce tiptoed into her bedroom, dimly lit with LED nightlights. He kissed her gently on the forehead and watched her even, tranquil breathing. He walked backwards from the room and stood in the center of the living room. His throat had that achy, fiery dryness that could only be quenched by several shots of straight Grey Goose. It was waiting in the car for him, but he couldn't do it in Grandma's living room tonight. He had once more given her hope. She liked the people she met at the bomb shelter, and he didn't want to bring shame on her again. Shame, shame, that was it. He felt it would kill her as she became more and more fragile, and I'll stop there.
Nice tension, and I wanted to keep going, because
Okay.
he's right, like he really needs this, and that wonderful burning in the throat that can only be quenched, but then no, he can't, and you once you've got us on that kind of hook, with the stakes, you can keep going back and forth a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't want him to easily win, because once we know the shame and the important, then it's like, but, right? And we love worrying about that kind of thing. So,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. I can't remember how I said this, but we'll go Eileen, then Frances, and Carrie.
Oh, okay. Well, I carried on from where I was, so I don't know how much I achieved, but here we go. So she's in this place where she knows no one. We need to take you to hospital. What will happen to Pierre's body? We'll take care of it, promise. He's Roman Catholic. He must be buried. At the hospital, the doctor who attended her was an elderly, gray-haired man, yet, unlike Dr. Legrand in Alsace, ruddy-faced with blue eyes. He introduced himself as Dr. Acton as he stripped off the bandage on her still throbbing arm and examined the wound. "You're lucky, young lady," he said. "At first glance, the wound looks clean. Dr. Legrand put iodine on it, she said. Good man. He's the vet. At this, Dr. Acton chuckled. Very lucky, I'd say, but I'm going to wash it again. Why is it still throbbing? Reva asked. Excuse me. You've been shot. What did you think was going to happen? He washed her wound again, and she felt that same agonizing burst of intense pain she'd felt before. Then he asked, can you live with the pain? Reva was puzzled by the question, but nodded her head. She'd lived with it this long. Dr. Acton must have seen the bafflement in Reva's eyes, because he added, we're short of medication these days. I'll give you a couple of codeine pills for emergencies, but take them only if you're desperate. If you don't need them, give them to a local doctor wherever you end up, or bring them back to me. Reva nodded. She'd known there were shortages, but she was still shocked. It was silly to think that only the French suffered. She knew that in her head, but this brought it home to her heart.
Ooh, I love that material. You know, and it's interesting, and I don't know if it's because you talked last night at the event about, you know, writing short, but each moment feels like it's potent and you can develop it. So
Exactly.
the moment where she says, what's going to happen with his body? And then somebody says, I'll take care of it, I promise. And then she says he's Catholic, he has to be buried. And that's sort of it. But there's such a moment of, you know, is it going to be easy for him to be buried? Is it, you know, do they have a thing they do with everybody and that's not buried? And, you know, so just, and then that tension of, can I trust this person and can I go off, but my arm is throbbing, right? So I think you can, now that you've got this is never, I'm never saying what you should have done, but you've started to lay out all these things.
Tell me what I should have done. I don't care.
Now you can dig in, but that's it. You get the first draft and it's like, wow, there's just loads of fabulous. I mean, you've got, you know, sensei detail and interiority and all those pieces are there, but there's still, you can dig in. And then, you know, I think you can let more be at stake with the arm, because it is, right? It's like, and I see it, like it's there, but it's quite subtle. It's like, he's sort of saying it's going to be okay. Why is it still throbbing? You know, and I want to worry more. I want to worry more about whether she can trust him and whether he's right. And even when she pulls off the bandage, you know, this, and then I think the stuff with the codeine is great because he's like, do you think you can handle it? And I want to worry more that she can't handle it, you know, that she wants to, but she can't. And now if she takes the codeine, it's like a moral, you know, she's taking it from some soldier, right? So, I mean, it's great material and you're digging in just the right way, but just keep going and don't, you know, once again, it's sort of like with these dilemmas where we can see, you know, once you've got us there, you can really, you know, you can really milk it. Yeah, fabulous. All right, Frances.
Okay, this is something I've been working on in the book. So, Matthew lifted Katrina up onto the half-formed haystack as easily as if she were one of the bundles of dried hay. She stood and found her balance in the center, and Philip tossed up the first bundle. Her mind wandered as she placed the hay in just the right spot. She was still brooding over why George had ignored her and still wondering how her father could possibly think she could marry a widower like Herr Schneider. The anger came back. She was startled when Matthew threw another bundle at her that almost knocked her off the haystack. You must stop the sulking right now and pay attention, she warned herself, hearing her mother's voice in her head. She looked across to where her mother was busy arranging hay on top of her own stack, then over at Valk, who was handing hay up to her sister, and yet another one. They will not forgive me if the hay rots this winter because I didn't do this in the right way. Soon there was nothing in her mind but the hay.
Ooh, nice. Well, so first of all, those things are really fun, like the whole detail, right? Because it's this world that I don't know at all. But it's pleasurable, sort of like the Little House on the Prairie books, right? So I want to know what would be the wrong. I actually want to know what would make the hay rot, right? And what, you know what I mean, and what she had. So I love that, and then I also wanted to know. When Matthew lifted her, I wanted to know, like, did he put his hands on her waist? I mean, I would, you know, given all the other things going on, I would love to know a little more about that. But yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Always easy to write more.
Right. It's a nice, it's a nice scene where there's sort of community stakes and personal stakes and her own thoughts roiling, but that if she gets too caught up in them, things could go badly, right? And have real consequences. So yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Eleanor. You're unmuted.
Okay, thanks. A flash of white feathers appears. It must be an egret. We're driving on the 2-lane highway that links 680 with 80, still a few miles from Fairfield, where the river of 80 widens to 6 lanes and the Tahoe traffic merges to a clump. But for now, we're speeding past marshes, the egrets standing on one leg at the ditches and rivulets or bobbing their heads to fish. The meeting with the surgeon is behind me now, behind us, and it's on to Christmas at my daughter's house in West Sacramento, on to the grandkids and presents and a table laden with appetizers, sees candy, a tub of chilled wine. Once I knew I'd see Dr. Peck on the morning of Christmas Eve, I realized I'd have to tell Megan since I'd be showing up at her door only a few hours later. And I could hardly break the news to her once the momentum of celebration rushed us along. So I had phoned her to avoid overthinking my choice of when to tell. I sat in the armchair in my bedroom and took deep belly breaths, letting my lungs fill and my shoulders rise. She picked up on the third ring. I have some difficult news, I began. I told her my cancer's name, clear cell carcinoma, that it was rare and that I was already having tests and had a consult scheduled. I told her quickly so she'd know I had it in hand. Megan is calm in a crisis, even-tempered, almost laconic, the opposite of her dead sister, the opposite of me, my endless urge to explain.
Beautiful. You know, what's wonderful about this is that this is just, you wouldn't think of it as exposition, but we have this, this couple on the road, right? And we have the flash of the egrets and this beautiful place, and then we have what's coming, and that's exposition, right? That's giving us a little narrative flash forward to just the road and the traffic first. And then we get what they're coming from, so this flashback, and then we get a further flash forward. They're going towards Christmas Eve, and then that leads to a further flashback of having to tell the daughter, because it's going to be this timing, and I it's very easy to follow. So that's an interesting way to, again, to play with narratively moving us around, but keeping us always in scene and in sensate detail, so that, and then creating a tension between the past, the present, what's coming, where we are, how much we're in the present versus in the past or in the future, right? Which I think is thematic as well to what's going on, when you're grappling with these kinds of.
Well, actually, when Julia and I were in our little room together, we had a conversation talking about like what was going to come next, and I was telling her that I was very worried about writing about Christmas. Because Christmas is such a cliche. I just wasn't sure how this was going to happen. So she gave me some encouragement, asked me a few questions, and then I got an idea. And, that's always helpful, right? I mean, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and I have every faith in you to bring out all the nuance, including the stuff that might be cliche but moving, and the way that it's always a tension with what else is going on, and so I have every confidence in you. The one note I wanted to say was it's such a little thing, but with the belly breaths, I didn't know the phone was. I didn't know that the daughter hadn't picked up yet. And I really liked that when I figured it out, that she's already. So I just would bring in that little note of the ringing, or that the belly breaths are waiting for the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. Really great work, everybody. Look how much we got done with 5 people in 2 hours. So did everybody read? No, Julia. Oh, no, wait, just hold on.
Well, I didn't read, but I also I went so off the
That's okay. That's okay.
It's not about any of the stuff we've been talking about.
That's okay. The only rule is that you have to write and then you read it without apology. So, and I love your writing, so please share.
Okay, thank you. The Having of a Public Turf. It was one of the few perks only a few producers could display, and even for them, it usually happened only once they'd reached a particular status after a particular level of rainmaking yielded a particular rainfall for the networks. The talent, on the other hand, could drop into, say, the Langham any time of night or morning. Their status publicly gratified easily, but the producers, they had to earn it differently, slowly, and over time, not hot and in a flash like the supernova of stardom. It was kind of like a hinge. It's
Yeah.
meant to be a hinge. Well, I was thinking I was going to stay with our project, but then this was that little hinge point that ended up being this other voice. And anyway, it goes back to
That's great. It's great though. I mean, it's sort of it's sort of exposition, right? It's telling us about the world, and but again, we got these vivid metaphors of the supernovas, and we've got the contrast between the producers and the talent, and then we also have this great voice. The talent could blah 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 say, right? So we get these little examples that drop us into a specific kind of thing the talent might be able to do, right? So that's a wonderful voice-driven way to get us to a very specific moment. So I knew like there's not going to be any piece that isn't going to be playing with sort of exactly all of these things, right? These are our tools. Really, this is it. It's like the external, the internal, and the expository, right? Or the sort of narration. So, yeah. But what we're looking at is bringing in that voice, bringing in the tension, the contrasts, so that and the detail and the metaphors and all of those things, so that it stays alive in our minds, and the stakes are high. Yeah, so great. All right, so let's just use our last couple of minutes to set goals. And really, the more ordinary your goal becomes, but because it's the right fit for you, you just know, like, this is what I'm going to do. We've talked a little bit about, like, sometimes it's a minimum goal and a reach goal, but just like what works for you to keep you motoring along. Where are you headed, Frances?
I just added more.
Oh, I think you. Oh, there's. But I didn't see it though. Did you say where you were going on vacation?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm going to Scandinavia.
Bjorn.
Yes. I'm going bird watching in Norway and Finland, and visiting friends in Denmark. And then I just added on a 3-week bird watching trip in Uganda.
Wow.
I'll be gone for 2 months.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Cool.
Of course, you'll be online every week from Uganda.
I'm sure. All right. Aline is going to complete the review of the next chapter, write more on the scenes that she started this evening, which should fit in to where she is in the review. So fabulous. Frances is going to revise 2 scenes a day and try to finish the second draft before said vacation. It's great. Eleanor is sticking with 300 words, maybe 4 times a week. Good. Flexibility is of the essence. Catherine's stretch goal is to continue revision up to and including the midpoint, and the immediate goal is to do the next 750 word assignment. Great. Julia, minimum goal, keep Monday, Wednesday, Thursday morning just right up. Great. And the reach goal is finish the typing up of the handwritten work I'm behind on. Yeah, good. Well, thank you all for moving the time, and wish me luck staying awake.
Yeah, good luck. You got to caffeinate.
I have already. This is me on caffeine. Like, me on caffeine in the morning is like off the hook, and then me on caffeine at night is like sort of a regular. Oh goodness, but it's good to have adventures.
Rock and roll.
If caffeine's
right.
an adventure, you need a new life.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to be doing a free sneak peek into the April Sonoma County Writers Camp, so look for that. It'll go out in my newsletter on Tuesday, and we'll start posting it on social media. It's actually, if you go to our website, SonomaCountyWritersCamp.com, there's a little link in that top menu that says free writing class, and it's live now for this coming one, which is in a couple weeks soon. So come to that and spread the word, and
Wish I could, but I will be going to Alsace to research my novel.
oh, poor Ali.
Yeah.
Fun.
Tragedy, right?
Life is hard.
It's expensive, but
Expensive.
All right, and yeah, great. Keep writing. Power on. Great work, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy. Have a lovely evening.
You too. And I got your check. Thank you.
Oh, you did. Good.
All right.